All right, let's go. Well, all right, and PK Subban finally retired. He's an awful young guy to retire, 33 years old.
Yeah, Daddy played 13 seasons, won the Norris Trophy in 2013, and you kind of got a little criticized, right?
Yeah, well, didn't you get highly criticized on what you said about him on Coach's Corner?
Well, I told him to stop acting the way he's acting, like jumping around after a goal, and because he's ticking off the players. And he was ticking off the players.
Really? And then of course the papers got a hold of that. Ooh, boy, did they ever criticize you for saying it. But the thing is, this is what I was thinking when you've said that about a lot of players.
When you jump around after a goal and do that, he was ticking the guys off in the warm up. But anyhow, he straightened all that out. And
so let's see, who else did you criticize for acting goofy after? Well, sort of the Hurricanes, but who else was there?
Sidney Crosby. When he was a rookie.
Yeah.
Usually it happens, when they're rookies.
They get all
excited,
jumping around, and
I remember you really gave it to. You gave it to Ty, a personal close friend of yours.
Who's that? Oh, Ty, yeah.
Ty Domi. And you, what did he do that ticked you off?
He rode the hockey stick.
Oh, right.
And I remember when he was in New York, he let on, he had the belt. Remember he let on, he
put his hands to his
after he fought Probert.
Yeah, the first time. Oh. Not the second time.
You not only criticized him on Hockey Night in Canada, I think you called him up personally and said to knock it off.
Yeah, he was a good friend of mine. I always remembered him. Young girl was dying dying of cancer or something. I asked him for a sweater, and he scribbled. You know how players scribble on the
their autograph is totally unlegible. It's just a scribble.
I get a sweater sometimes to sign a sweater, or I used to, and you couldn't recognize one name, and they'd have to put their number on because
exactly.
Yeah.
The story you were saying, though, is that you had the sweater and you were going to get it signed because she wanted to buried.
You think you'd sign the name right. So he bought it. He gave the money. He bought a real sweater. A real sweater cost $250.
Yeah, he went out. Imagine Ty going out and buying a Toronto Maple Leaf sweater with his name on it.
And he signed it right.
Because he needed it, because he did it the day of the game. I remember you saying.
Yeah, well, it was just before a game. I shouldn't have done it. But anyhow, so how do we get into that?
Well, we're just talking about guys that you criticized. And Ty, a couple of times you gave it. But
I criticized a few guys.
Yeah, but I was funny. I don't remember PK too much scouting. I kind of remember him playing for the Markham Islanders a little bit.
He acted the same way after he scored a goal, and he could really shoot a puck.
Yeah, he could really skate too. He was really fast. But I remember his two brothers, Malcolm, the goalie for the Marlies, and Jordan a little bit better.
I remember Jordan could really skate.
He was as good, if not better, skater.
The whole family was good.
Yeah, and as usual, you guys didn't notice the goalie.
No, you know what? Malcolm Subban was, when we were watching him for the Marlies, he wasn't very good. He was terrible. And at that time, the kids had to go on a list from Central Scouting to be eligible to be drafted.
Yeah.
So I remember I went to Rob, who was the head scout. I said, well, what are we going to do about Subban? I said, Belleville's going to pick him, because of PK, right? They'll like the family. And he goes, he says, put him on. He says, and rate him like a C. And so rate him a C. So he got picked like 13th round or 14th round by Belleville. And 4 years later, he was a first-round pick of the Boston Bruins.
Well, let's talk about McKinnon. Boy, oh boy, he hit the jackpot.
Yep, signed a big new contract and kind of threw a little bit of a slap at McDavid.
12.6 he made. And McDavid's making 12.5. I don't know whether.
If you were McDavid, would you be mad at that?
I don't know.
I think
he did it. I hope he did it as a joke.
I don't know. Like, I
100,000 here, 100,000 there.
Well, I don't know. Like, if I was McDavid, if McKinnon called him up and said, "Look, I'm doing this," and kind of jerking around, then it was all right. But if he didn't call him up and he kind of did it, I think I'd be a little bit mad.
Well, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know
You
what
can't relate, eh, Dad?
Can't relate to that guy when you get up around $12 million. Chara retired, 45 years old.
Yep, so almost 1,700 games. He holds the record for the most games in the NHL by a defenseman.
And you know why I like him, eh, Dad?
Why do you like him?
Because he's a vegan. Not only is he a vegetarian, he's a vegan. So just imagine all that.
Well, he's in pretty good shape, 45 years old.
Yeah, so remember, you with your hockey, they had to have that steak before the game. There goes that theory.
Well, you know what I remember was you went down. Remember, you went down to Boston to drop the puck.
Oh, that was fun.
And you wanted Mark Savard to take
Mark Savard, he's a pretty good guy.
Yeah, and he was your favorite, and you were praising him, so you thought he was going to take the Chara
I
cape.
thought for sure. And geez, Chara is about 8 feet tall.
It
I
was
look like
awful.
a little wee dumpy out
He
there.
looked like a hobbit next to him.
Yeah,
was. It
I think
was
I'd come
awful.
to his knee, and that long stick. Holy!
Didn't he, though, like you were down there and he was playing, he came over and said hello?
Yeah, he was. He really is I know they always say everybody's a nice guy, but he really is a nice guy. He came over and said hello.
So how many fights do you think he had in his career?
I don't know.
76.
He had 76.
76 fights. Early, probably, in his career. Towards
Yeah,
the
it
end,
must
nobody
have
was
been.
going to fight him.
Yeah,
but he
nobody.
had 7. I counted it up, so I thought, I don't when he fought, like, it was like,
Yeah, it was way
remember he grabbed, who's the Leaf defenseman he grabbed?
His fights don't last too long.
Can I ask, was because he's so huge and strong, obviously, and everything, did he initiate a lot of fights, or was
No, he did not
Because
want
he's
to
like
fight.
a big dog in a fight. He doesn't initiate it, but boy, does he ever
Yeah,
finish them, right?
exactly.
So let me ask you, do you think Chara's in the Hall of Fame?
Chara?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. What about PK?
PK, he might be a little...
Got the Norris Trophy, and was reading in the paper today, only one guy that won the Norris Trophy is not in the Hall of Fame.
Well, and
Randy Carlyle.
Randy... I remember Randy Carlyle. I said, why did they ever trade you from Toronto? And, I said, I thought that you were the best defenseman. We were having a morning skate. And he says, I don't know. And he was a good defenseman.
Yeah, that was like Toronto's chased a lot of defensemen out of the thing. Remember Berard? You remember they were out there after him, and that was who Chara got, was Berard.
Yeah.
Remember he threw him around. Like
I
a rag.
remember Chara.
Dad, didn't you get a call from an owner one time asking about who he should pick for something?
I'll tell you who it was. It was Eugene Melnick. And Eugene Melnick asked me, Wade Redden, who would you keep, Wade Redden or Chara? I said, what is this, a joke? I said, Chara would go on and play for another 20 years, which I think he did.
Something like that, pretty close.
You predicted
I didn't
it.
think he'd go. And Wade Redden, you know what he did? He went down to Hartford.
Right, he eventually got traded like 3 years later.
Yeah, he went down to Hartford. They sent him down to Hartford, and he was making big money there. And they didn't have income tax in Hartford at the time. Oh, I don't know if they still do or not.
No, he was making like double. Like
Woo, baby.
You know what I remember about Wade Redden, we're getting off topic, was remember Scott Oak interviewing him after they were playing. They were playing in I guess it was an elimination game with Ottawa, and it was a 2-on-1. And Wade Redden kind of ran at the guy with the puck, and the guy shifted it over, and they walked it in, and they scored. So Scott Oakes interviewed Wade Redden, and he's just like devastated, right, Redden, because he made a bad play. And Scott Oakes going, so why did you why didn't you stay in the middle? Well, I don't know. Well, let's just take a look. Okay, let's stay
nice.
here. Like, run the replay. And he's like, I don't know. I haven't looked at it. And remember, and you know what? He was never the same after that. What?
Come to think of it, he wasn't.
No.
He was a pretty good defenseman up until then.
So Eugene didn't know the thing with asking you your opinion, that you have to do what your opinion said, or don't ask you again, right, Dad?
Yeah. Anyhow, Chara turned into, not that anybody would have said the same thing. I don't know why Ottawa kept Wade Redden. I don't know. Anyhow, let's go along. And Pat Bergeron, here's a guy making $2.5 million, and he's back. Of all the guys in the National Hockey League, I think one of the most important guys is Bergeron. I might be a
Patrice.
little prejudiced.
Yeah.
He's Bruin.
You know what? It was funny. There was the one guy in TSN. They were talking about Shane Wright, and the guy goes, "Well, you know, he's not McKinnon and he's not McDavid. You know, he's not that really big superstar. He's kind of like Patrice Bergeron." You go, "Oh, really? 2-time Stanley Cup winner, Selke Trophy winner,
And takes all the draws.
Takes all the draws. Going to be on the Olympics. He's that kind of guy, right?"
Yeah.
And he was kind of. And I thought, boy, there's not a real put down for the Bergeron.
Yeah. And we'd have to talk about Crosby, and 35 years old, and plays 18 years. And you know what I remember about him? I remember he took a lower salary one time so the team could get better players. He really is a team player.
Now, you in the beginning, where he was another player you really gave it to, right? And you even got a call from his parents, and
No, I remember.
What was your issue with him?
Oh, I
He
don't
was
know.
jumping around.
was he?
You know what? He was always yapping at the ref.
Yeah,
Yes,
and it just wasn't a good thing. He asked if he could come over and before Coach's Corner and sit with us just before I got fired. And,
Really?
Yeah, Crosby.
Well, because I remember one thing that happened was that he was Tim Horton's spokesman, and you were kind of getting into it with him. And Tim Hortons was also a sponsor of Hockey Night in Canada was
Yeah.
running, and they kind of called up and said, Don is, we're sponsoring Don, and he's gotten a little bit of a war with Crosby, and he's our guy that we're paying. So could you tell Don to knock it off? But you didn't knock it off.
take it
But
easy.
at the end, though, you were good. You walked to after a game. You were walking with somebody, and you were talking.
Oh yeah, yeah. I was walking back after a game. It was
It's the playoffs.
and there was two people walking behind me, and they were really depressed. I said, "Don't worry about it." I said, "Crosby will grab the puck the first time he grabs the puck, he'll walk in and he'll score." And I said, "Don't worry about it, they'll win." And Kathy says, "You know who they were? It was Crosby's parents."
Get out, really?
Yeah. And you know what he did? First time he grabbed the puck, he walked right in and deked the guy and put it in the top corner.
Oh, isn't that
I
great?
remember that.
So, Dad, I got to ask you a question, though. So, hockey's like last night, the Leafs were on and stuff. The Leafs have had training camp for 2 days, and they're playing exhibition games. When you were playing, how long was your training camp before you would play an exhibition game?
About 3 weeks. And you know why? I'll tell you why. The players play today, and they skate. We didn't skate because we had to work.
Yeah, you guys had to work, so you couldn't go on the ice.
Even the guys in the National Hockey League, they took about 2 weeks before the training because they had to. They had to work too. They weren't making that much money. Well, Tim Blake Wheeler, they took his captaincy away, and a lot of people think that doesn't mean a lot. I mean, it would have if they had taken my captaincy away, and it was the coach that took it away too.
Rick Bonus. So the question is, Dad, do you trade him?
I would, unless he didn't care, but he said he didn't care.
But maybe that's the problem.
Yeah, whatever it was. But he's 36 years old, and it's pretty tough to trade a guy who's 36 years old.
Yeah.
And they took the captaincy away from Dustin Brown in L.A. I think that was Sutter that did that.
Yeah.
And
What
Trevor,
would be a reason? Like, can you give us one reason that you'd take a captaincy off?
I don't know.
They ever took the captain?
there's always been the rumors around Winnipeg that there was issues in the dressing room.
Yeah.
That's been for years. People have been saying that.
They got a better team than they showed every year. This Rick Bonus, he knows what's going on. He had interviews with all the players, and you change the captaincy. That tells you something.
Dad, talk about captaincy. Last week we talked about Suzuki for Montreal being
Too young, I think, and if you want my opinion, I think he's too young. Suzuki, and he doesn't speak French.
Right.
I mean, he'd be more worried about speaking French than playing in the game.
Right. He's got to meet the media after, and he's thinking, is that?
They'll.
If he starts to falter, the press will have no mercy on him. And Brad Marchand agreed with us.
Well, what did he
This
say?
is what Brad Marchand said. he was on a podcast. He says, it's almost unfair to be giving these young kids captaincies at 20, 21, 22 years old because they don't have any idea what it is like to be a real captain in the NHL. You're setting a kid up for failure by doing that. So, Dad, we'd like to thank our sponsor, Spreads.ca. They're a Canadian online casino and sportsbook. And if you sign up now and use the promo GRAPES, they'll match your deposit up to $250. You get 10 spins on the big wheel for some big dough. And your first sports bet, they'll spot you $25. And this is their heyday now with football and baseball and hockey starting and basketball will be going. And
don't let everyone forget that they were very generous to Don Cherry's Pet Rescue Foundation. A lot of money to us.
Well, what'd they give you?
I don't know.
Over $18,000.
Yeah, close to $20,000. So you know what? There's a lot to choose from out there. But remember, if you love your pets, go to them.
Yeah, that's for sure. So, Dad, when PK retired, he put it out on Twitter. And this was one of his first sentences that he put out on the Twitter. I remember my dreams of playing in the NHL and winning Stanley Cups, similar to the guys on Don Cherry's Rock'em Sock'em hockey tapes at the end of every volume, with black eyes, broken bones, and tears of joy. To this day, I still dream about it.
Well, it's,
Tim, I think the funniest thing with PK, and if anyone wants to Google it out there, he did an imitation of Don Cherry. He was better at doing Don Cherry than you were, Dad. I mean, it is hilarious. For anyone that wants a really good laugh, please Google it.
His last word goes, that PK's a good defenseman. Not as good as Bobby Orr.
And if he had your mannerisms.
He's no Bobby Orr.
He's no Bobby Orr.
And didn't he call you up to see if you were going to be upset with him and we just loved it. We said, go for it.
Yeah. He did that with George Stropolopoulos, right? Then he thought, oh, don't do that because Don will get mad.
Yeah. He called you up and he said, do you mind? And anything making fun of you, we just think is great, right? It
worked right in.
Yeah, it did.
So a lot of people have asked us to talk about Rock'em Sock'em hockey, and one day we'll get into the whole how it got started and everything. It's kind of long. But the one thing that I think that we did better than anybody in Rock'em Sock'em was when you would go out and do signings.
Well, we learned early.
Learned the hard way.
The hard way.
The thing. And it's a real art to do.
You were talking about somebody that... Well, you tell.
Well, yeah, the one thing that we learned was that if everybody doesn't go away happy, you might as well not do the signings of the product, and that's just for anything, right? Because if it defeats the purpose. And I remember you were signing a book, and we'll get into like how we did it. And the guy came up to me and he says, "I really appreciate your dad took the time to talk to me about it, and he talked to me a little bit about the Leafs." I said, "That's good." He goes, last week, he says, I waited in line for 2 hours to get a book signed. And he said, the guy who signed it didn't even look at me. And I said, oh, yeah. He goes, and when I got home, I threw the book in the garbage. And he says, it totally destroyed him. So your whole thing was to take a couple of minutes with people.
Well, Cindy came up with the idea.
Well, what we used to do to move things along quite quickly, and boy, we made that line move, was that I would go ahead of time and ask the people who do they want the book signed or the tape signed to. And then I would say, is it Caitlin? How do you spell it? And then that way, Dad, you could spend time talking to the people instead of asking them how to spell the name. Is it Brian with a Y or Brian with an I? And I'll tell you a quick story. There was one time, of course, I worked the line, and I heard this woman say to the guy behind him, why do they use these stickums? And the guy says, well, that's so Don doesn't have to talk to you. Well, I put up with a lot of what people say to you, as you know, right? And I butted in. I said, excuse me. I said, that's just the opposite, sir. I said, that way he can talk to the people instead of asking how do you spell their name. And the guy looked at me and the whole deal. But we had it down pretty good, didn't we, Tim?
Yeah, that's for sure. Because I remember the time we were doing, it was a book signing was different. Because
books or tapes. Same.
Books or tapes. But, we were one of the first books and did the signings, and then the DVDs were there. So you were doing a book, and the girl said, my name is Cindy. And so you wrote Cindy. And she looked at it, she goes, no, it's C. And she goes, no, it's Cyndi. And you look, so now the book's ruined.
Oh, yeah.
You can't, remember what she said?
No.
You said, what am I, mind reader? So we had to get her another book.
Another book. So, that was the importance of stickums. And, another thing that we brought up is that, I could pretty well see how long the lineup was. And okay, now it's an hour. We're supposed to be there an hour. And I would tell the store to stop.
I used to stay an hour and a half.
Yeah. And if it was an hour, then we'd stay an hour and a half.
Yeah.
So the thing was, I would tell the store to stop selling the tape at the time, because if anyone that night would buy the tape, they think it's going to get signed.
One store kept selling, and it was.
And then there was chaos because people, hey, I bought this tape, and now he's not going to sign it because he's got somewhere important to go afterwards.
Yeah.
So I said, we've got to, and which did not go over too well with the store, because they're there to sell tapes.
Yeah.
And then I say, no more tapes are to be sold.
And I'd look bad. I'd be the guy to walk out.
That walk out. Well, there's 50 other people in line that had just bought the tape, multiple tapes, because.
But I have to say, Dad, we never really had one jerk in line.
No, it was a funny thing. I don't think we ever had one.
I worked the line. I never had one jerk being a smart aleck ever.
Ever. And it used to be little kids there, and
It was, I hate to say it, it was really Canadiana. And the thing was, we said, we're not going into Toronto. We wouldn't sign in Toronto. We would always sign Kingston, Brantford, London, and all over the place.
They were all good people.
And they were all really nice.
They were nice. And
They're polite. Majority of people were pleased and thank you. So, Dad, we're going to wrap up. But one thing about Rock'em Sock'em I really liked was the time we did Rock'em Sock'em. I think it was 5.
Yes, it was.
Where we
I had sunglasses, and I had the big red coat.
Right. We did a music video with Chris Shepard, who was a DJ back in the day.
Yeah, and was picked the worst video of the year
by Much Music.
Yeah.
But it was called Rock'em Sock'em Techno, and we're going to end with it right now.
All right, let's go.